There was a professor and pastor by the name of Haddon Robinson, and he really well known, was the president of Gordon Conwell Seminary. You know, he taught preachers to preach. He was leading a trip in Turkey, and he was leading people to all of the churches that are in the book of Revelation. And they were going to all the different towns, and they were visiting them and looking at them and understanding then how, you know, what they knew about the towns might help them better understand those letters. So on their last night there, they were in a town called Izmir, and they were staying at a really nice hotel there, at least for Turkey, and they ate at the nicest restaurant in town, and they had their guide join them. And their guide joined them. He was a local man who had lived in America for a while, and so he spoke very good English. He was a very good guide for them. He could understand everything they said. He could explain everything to them that they needed explained. And as they were eating, he began to ask very serious questions about their Christianity, about their faith. They knew that he was a Muslim, and he just wanted to know more about their faith. He'd spent all this time, and they had been talking about the scriptures, and finally Haddon Robinson asked him, he said, "Let me ask you, if you died today, do you know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, when you died, that you would stand before Allah?" And the man said, "Oh, no. As a Muslim, I know there's 5 things that I have to do, and I've only done 2 of them. So I know very well where I stand with Allah today." And that led to a very deeper conversation about how Jesus is different from that. And there's nothing that we can do that would lead us to eternal life. It's what He has done for us and the grace that He's given us that leads us to that. And that led to even deeper questions. And finally, after a long conversation, the night was getting late, they knew they were going to have to leave, Haddon Robinson asked the man, he said, I feel like it would be really neglectful of me if I didn't now ask you, do you want to follow Jesus? Do you want to put your faith and trust in Him? And the man answered by saying, "You have no idea what you're asking me. If I followed Jesus and became a Christian like you, and anybody knew about it, my wife would leave me, my family would disown me, my boss would fire me. And you say, well, just go to America. It'll be okay there. But my country wouldn't give me a visa to leave. You're leaving tomorrow. I don't suspect that you're going to take care of me for the rest of my life. So I would literally starve to death in my country as a result of that decision." Now, that's a sad truth for many people. But that man knew the cost of following Jesus. He understood the obstacle that was in his way to being able to follow Jesus in his life. Because of that, I envy him a little bit. I envy that he knew what that was. Because I think some of us, because we don't have some of those natural obstacles like he did, we don't understand and fathom and know what it is that's keeping us from knowing and finding and understanding more of Jesus in our lives. We are blind to the things that are holding us back in our following Him. And I wonder if we were like this man and really delved into the things that are holding us back, what it is that we would uncover. Now, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 8 again today. And in Matthew chapter 8 last week, if you were with us, we saw these 4 different passages about healing that Matthew puts all together in the beginning of chapter 8. And we saw how these people came to find more Jesus. They brought their problems to Him. They brought their different struggles and sicknesses. And because they were willing to overcome particularly some of the societal and cultural obstacles that said people like them shouldn't be with Jesus, they were able to find the healing that Jesus had for them. They were able to find the more Jesus that they needed, and He was able to restore their lives. Now, as we move forward in chapter 8, what we're going to see today are 4 obstacles to people who think that they're following Jesus. Some of them want to, Some of them desire to, but there's obstacles that are going to keep them from doing that. Some of them look like they are, but we see there's obstacles to them really having more of Jesus in their lives. And as we look at these obstacles, I challenge you to let the Holy Spirit speak to your hearts, that you might find the things in your life that are keeping you from finding more of Him in all of your life, in all of your relationships, and all that you have going on in your own life. So let's start with verse 18 today. Just one verse here. It kind of sets the scene for what's going on. In verse 18 it says, when Jesus saw the crowd around him, He instructed His disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. So as Jesus is healing people, we saw this in verse 16 and 17 last week, more and more people are coming to Him. He's doing these great miracles, and more people want to come and find the healing and hope He has for them. And so as that happens, the crowds get larger. And Jesus has His followers say, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake. Now, know that when it says the word disciples, that does not necessarily mean the 12 men that we normally think of as disciples. Matthew's not written chronologically necessarily in Jesus' life. And so we see the call of some disciples later. So some of them could have been there. Some of them weren't. Certainly we know from other Gospels, some of the disciples that we know about, particularly ones that were fishermen, would have been there already. Whoever it is, it's people who've been following Jesus, and they show the signs that they want more of Jesus, they want to follow Him, they want Him in their life. This move to the boat is not an attempt to get away from the crowds, it's a call of discipleship. Jesus is saying, I'm going to the other side of the lake. It's clear that Jesus says, I want you to come with me because I want to spend time with you, not the crowds. The crowds are going to be there wherever Jesus goes, right? As soon as He does a miracle in the next place, they're going to crowd around Him. They're not going to get away from that. But Jesus wants to have this time with them to grow closer to them, that they might come to know Him more, that He might come to know them more. Let's get in the boat, follow me, and let's grow closer to one another. So what we find first, the first obstacle we see here, verse 19, is the obstacle of the cost of discipleship. It says in verse 19, that one of the teachers of religious law said to Him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. But Jesus replied, Foxes have dens to live in, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay His head. So this man says to Jesus, I want to follow you wherever you go. And that sounds like a good thing, doesn't it? It's kind of hard to read that and understand why Jesus responds the way He does, or even to make sense of what Jesus is saying sometimes. But here's what we find. Number one, it tells us this man is a teacher of religious law. That is, in the book of Matthew is written to Jewish people who understand who teachers of religious law are, and it is never a positive term. It is never a term that is said about somebody and it means something good. So already when we read that in the book of Matthew, we know there's a negative connotation to it. They're usually people that are prideful, that think pretty highly of themselves. And in fact, we may see that here, because the word that's used to describe him is teacher, right? What does he call Jesus? Teacher. That is also a term in the book of Matthew that is never used by a disciple in calling Jesus. A disciple never calls Jesus teacher. Not in the book of Matthew. And so Matthew is painting the picture that this guy assumes him and Jesus are pretty close on the same level. They're pretty similar guys. There's some pride there, right? In that pride, we can surmise if he is a teacher of the law, he knows the prophecies, and he has some inkling that Jesus might be the Messiah. He has to think that by following Jesus, it's going to lead to some good things in his life. This guy's going to be king, this guy's going to do great things, and I'm going to be right there with him. I'll follow him all the way to the top. But Jesus' response shows us why this statement that looks good at first isn't quite as positive as we thought. Jesus says the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. First of all, he makes it clear that you and I are not the same. He calls himself the Son of Man, which is a messianic term in the Old Testament that this teacher of the law would know very well. And so he's saying right away, we're not on the same level. And me as the Son of Man, I don't have a place to lay my head. I don't have a home. I don't have anything I carry around with me. Jesus is relying on others throughout his ministry. So what is Jesus saying by saying that? He's telling him, if I'm the leader, and I've got nothing, what are you as a follower of me going to have? Nothing. Following me isn't going to lead you to riches. Following me isn't going to lead you to fame. Following me isn't going to lead you to the things that you think it's going to. Instead, you've got things now, and you're going to have to give them up to follow me. Following me is going to cost you, not get you more. See, he didn't understand. The man we talked about that Haddon Robinson had spoken to, he understood that there was a cost to follow Jesus in his life. This guy thinks there's a gain to follow Jesus. And for so many of us, that's the obstacle. We just come to Jesus and we're looking for things from him. We want what he has. We want what he offers. We want the good things that he promises us. But we don't really realize the cost that our lives must pay to receive those things. So there's an obstacle here of the cost of discipleship. Remember that John the Baptist, the passage we based this series on, where John said there's got to be less of me and more of him. For there to be more of him in our lives, it always costs from who we are. The second obstacle we see starting in verse 21. Here we see selfishness. It says, another of his disciples said, Lord, first let me return home and bury my father. But Jesus told him, follow me now. Let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. Well, if you thought the first one seemed rough, this one sounds a lot worse, doesn't it? I mean, why wouldn't Jesus let him go to his father's funeral? That doesn't seem reasonable, does it? Well, there's a lot that's lost here in language and in culture. What we know is this. In that culture, it's a very big deal to bury your father. It is the greatest priority you have as a son, to be there, to bury your father, to take care of his estate. It was seen as a more important responsibility than nearly anything else in your life. If your father died, there's nothing that should happen, nothing that should come in front of that. So why would Jesus ask him not to bury his father? Well, ask yourself this question. If there's nothing more important than burying your father to this guy, okay? Nothing is more important than that. Why is he standing by a lake with Jesus in the first place? Why isn't he burying his father right then? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. His father's not dead. See, this is a cultural idiom about family responsibilities. He's saying, I need to be there when my father dies. I need to be there when this happens. I have family to take care of. I have people that I'm responsible for. So he says to Jesus, here's the word that he gets wrong. Look at it, there's one word. Just like the first guy said, teacher, and that blew the whole thing. This guy says, first, let me go home and take care of my father. Let me bury my father. Let me take care of my family responsibilities. Jesus will never be okay with you saying, first. It happens with my kids all the time when I ask them to do something. Let me finish this game first. I don't remember that being an option when I was a kid, right? To tell my parents, what you've asked me to do can wait. I'm gonna finish my stuff first. God is never okay with that. He's never going to be okay with being second or anything other than first in our hearts. Notice Jesus' response. Follow me. He doesn't just say follow me. What's he say? Follow me now. Follow me first. The following me has to be first. It's not Jesus saying you shouldn't care about your family. You shouldn't take care of those responsibilities. You shouldn't be there when your father dies. He says instead, let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. Let people who won't know me, let people who won't learn from me, let people who won't grow from me, take care of those things you're worried about. Follow me now. This still might seem like an unreasonable expectation, because can't Jesus be our number one priority and us still take care of our family? Still go to a funeral? It's the wrong question. The right question is whether or not this guy is really concerned about his family in the first place. Is that really what he's asking for and talking about and concerned about? Perhaps, and I believe, the real problem is this. What happens if he misses his dad's funeral? If he misses the funeral, he doesn't get an inheritance. He doesn't take over the family business. He loses his spot as the son that he is. He forfeits that by not taking care of that responsibility. So perhaps he's more concerned if he goes gallivanting around with Jesus that he's going to miss the funeral and he's going to lose out on all the things that he's counted on having for the rest of his life. Maybe it's not about his family at all. It's about him. And what he's saying is, first let me follow what I need. First let me follow my desires. He's being selfish. He's thinking of what matters to him and what he needs before he's thinking about what Jesus has called him to. And whenever our hearts, our desires, our needs come first before those of Jesus, you cannot find more of him. You'll just find more of yourself. The third obstacle is fear. We see that starting in verse 23. It's a familiar passage. Then Jesus gets into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples. And suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake, with waves breaking into the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. Then the disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." Jesus responded, "Why are you afraid? You have so little faith." Then he got up and rebuked the wind and waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. There's a lot we can talk about in this powerful miracle of Jesus and why it happens and when it happens and all that. But grasp this. These guys are at least willing to get in the boat, right? They didn't have any obstacles. They want to follow Jesus. Yes, we're getting in the boat with you. But they get in the boat with him, and then the storms come. Now, there's fishermen that have surely crossed this sea in this way more times than they can remember. And they've surely faced storms at that time. But this storm is unnatural to them. It's stronger than they've ever known before. And whether it's because of the boat or the storm, one or the other, they are fearful that this is it. They're all going to die here with Jesus. They're overcome with that fear. Jesus isn't. He's sleeping. And so they wake him up to say, "Hey, save us. We're going to drown." And Jesus asks the question, "Why are you afraid?" And then he answers the question, "You have so little faith." They don't trust and know and believe in the power he's displayed yet. Not in the way they need to. Fear. Fear has overwhelmed them, and fear has overcome them in a way that they don't seek Jesus, more of Jesus, in the way that they need to. Fear is driving their faith. They are afraid, so they believe they're going to drown and die. Their fear is dictating what they believe is coming next in their lives. If they had faith in the power of Jesus, they wouldn't be afraid. So, before we get too judgmental, we make this mistake all the time, don't we? First of all, this is what's going to happen. You make that decision to jump in the boat with Jesus and to get closer to him, I promise you the storms are coming. and they'll be strong. And they'll be greater than you think you can make it through. And we make the same mistake of them, that we look and we think God is sleeping through our problems because He's not doing anything about them. He hasn't changed them. He hasn't fixed them. And we say, God, why are you sleeping through my troubles, through my problems, through my trials? Do you want to know why Jesus was asleep in the boat? Because Jesus wasn't afraid of the storm. And so maybe, the times where you think that God's asleep in your life, He's not asleep. He's just not afraid. He knows you're going to make it through that storm. He knows you're going to grow through that storm. He knows what's coming at the end of that storm. And He never lets fear dictate what He believes about you. And He asks you don't let your fear dictate what you believe about Him. Fear, it's a great line from a Zach Williams song, right? Fear is a liar, if you know that song. Fear will always make us think things are different than they are. Until we overcome that fear, we can't really see Jesus for who He is. We see that in the next verse. Last obstacle is understanding. Verse 27, then the disciples were amazed. Who is this man, they asked. Even the winds and waves obey Him. Who is this man? Jesus shows authority over the storms. They're amazed because they've now seen Him show authority over all kind of sicknesses, over all kind of diseases, over all kind of things that they've never seen anybody change before in people's lives. And now He's even showing authority over nature. This is a greater authority than even they could have ever believed the Messiah would come and have. And so they are amazed at that. We should stand in amazement at what God does in our lives. We should stand in amazement at the great things that God has done. They even point out the wind and waves obey Him. Creation bends at His word. But here's the problem. There's one word again that's a problem. Who is this man? A man doesn't command the wind and waves. A man doesn't do these amazing things. A man is not worth giving up your life to follow. Jesus is God in the form of a man. He's God who took on flesh. Being a man is not His nature. It's not who He is. It's something that He did for us. He became that. He's more than that. That's an aspect of who He is in these years that He walked this earth, but that's not who He is. And so they don't fully yet understand and grasp who this is that they're in the boat with. They don't grasp the fullness of God that's with them. It's not until they shift from trying to understand Him as a man and they begin to know Him as the Son of God that they can truly follow Him and truly understand what He's there to do. And as you grow in your understanding of Jesus, you will grow in your understanding of what He wants from your life and what He's called you to in your life. And if our understanding of Him is limited, we are limited in how much we can find of Jesus in our life. The more we know of Him, those of you who have been in the faith for a long time in your life, you know that the more you know and understand of Him, the more you find Him in your life. And that's not because suddenly there's more Jesus in your life. It's because you now understand more. Because of that, you see more of what He's doing. God hasn't changed through your life. Your understanding of Him has grown. And so you get to see more and know more and understand more of what He's doing. He's already in the places that you've asked Him to work. He's already in the lives of the people that you want Him to change. He's already doing the things that would call Him to do. Our understanding keeps us from seeing it, from knowing all the things that God is doing. It's not just that our understanding of Him is an obstacle. It's our understanding of ourselves. If we think we know Him and we don't. If we think we understand Him when we don't. If we think we've lived for Him when we haven't. If we think we've given to Him when we've held back. if we think we found salvation when we never really looked for it in the first place, if we think our lives have changed when we haven't moved an inch, then we cannot possibly see more of Him in our lives because we don't see ourselves in the right way in the first place. So, as we look at all these obstacles, what we see is that the problem is often that the people think they want more Jesus, but they don't actually want more Jesus. They think they might want more of what He can give them, more of what He has for them, more blessing, more help, more healing, more whatever it is they're searching for. But they don't actually want a relationship with Him. Their pride comes first. They say they'll follow Him wherever they go, but they already think they know where He's going. And really, they think they know where their lives is going, and they're kind of asking Jesus to go along for the ride rather than lead them. There's people who say they'll follow, but not at that price. They want a cheaper version of grace, a cheaper version of discipleship. There's not package levels of discipleship. It's all or nothing. That's what Jesus calls us to. There's people who get in the boat, but they're afraid at every stiff wind that comes to their lives. And they immediately give up. And they immediately give in. When the one who made it all is in the boat with them and will help them overcome whatever they face. There's people who think they know Jesus, but they have no understanding of who He is. And the truth is, they haven't tried for a moment to understand more of who He is. They take what little they know, and then they use their own understanding to shape and mold who Jesus is into whoever they want Him to be. There was an Irish missionary by the name of Amy Carmichael. She wrote about this and called it shallow living. And she defined this as people who have much talk but little obedience. And she said, this kind of living is prevalent because so few are prepared to be like the pine on a hilltop alone in the wind for God. Are you prepared to be that pine, that tree, that there's nothing to protect it, exposed to the wind? To put yourself out there in a way that leaves you vulnerable, sometimes might be lonely, that's hard, that's a struggle, that costs more than you can imagine. Whether it's your pride or your selfishness, your fear, your lack of faith, your lack of understanding of who God is, those things are keeping you from being deeply rooted in a way that lets you stand on that hilltop and survive the winds that come. So, what does that even look like? What does that really even mean? When I went to college, I know that I probably thought that that's what my life looked like. The truth is, it was much more shallow living than I realized at the time. And I know what really opened my eyes to that was I had to take a church history course. It was a year long. In the beginning, the first semester, we studied the early church, and really, almost everything we were studying was about people being persecuted. In all the different waves of persecution the early church withstood. And we read story after story of these men and women of God who stood alone on the hilltop. And the one that stood out to me the most, I think, is a 22-year-old woman by the name of Perpetua. It was the end of the 3rd century in Rome. The emperor, Septimus Severus, hated Christians. And the reason he did was because he was okay with other religions being practiced in Rome, but they all needed to say that Rome, the unconquered sun, that God, was the greatest God of all. As long as you say Rome's the best, you can do whatever you want. Well, the Jews and the Christians, obviously, they weren't very readily willing to do that. And so Septimus Severus decided let's wipe out the Christians. The first group that was arrested was in Carthage in North Africa. There were 5 people who were in a baptism class. Perpetua was among that group, along with her slave girl, Felicitas. We know this story because they kept journals as they were in prison. We have those. Other inmates wrote of them and what happened. And then we have recordings of what happens in the end, too. And so, Perpetua, the first thing that happened when she was in prison, her dad came to visit her. Her dad wasn't a Christian, he was a pagan, and he begged her, he pleaded with her, just tell him you're not a Christian. Just say that you're not, so you can survive this, so you can go home. And Perpetua pointed to a vase. And she said, can you call that anything other than a vase? And her dad said, no. And she said, neither can I call myself anything other than what I am, which is a Christian. Well, they found out that Perpetua had a newborn baby. So they moved her to a different cell. Different place where she was able to have the baby brought to her, and she was able to feed the baby and take care of it. Her dad would bring the baby. The first time he begged her, think of your son. Think of him. He's going to grow up without you. If you let this happen, just make the offering. Just say you believe in their God and raise your son. She refused. And she said that whatever happens will be God's will. For you may be sure that we are not left to ourselves, but are all in His power. So finally she was brought to the governor. She was the last. All 4 before her stood strong in their faith. All 4 refused to make offerings and bow down to the God of Rome. All 4 were sentenced to death. She stood in front of the governor, and again, her dad broke in. He pleaded with the governor. He pleaded with her. She has a newborn baby. She's only 22. She has so much of her life. She doesn't know what she's doing. And the governor even begged her. He told her she didn't have to bow down. If she'd just make the sacrifice, she wouldn't have to say the words. She wouldn't have to do anything else. Just do that little part, and I can let you off the hook here. She refused. And she was sentenced to death. The 5 of them sang hymns as they were marched in front of wild animals and gladiators. And as they stood there, the first thing they did, in history it says, they let loose a mad cow, which we believe is a bull. And that bull hit Perpetua and Felicitas first, tossed her in the air, tore her clothes, knocked her hair loose. She stood up, she fixed her clothes, and then she called everything to stop. And everybody froze. And this woman, she went to the middle of the arena and she picked up her hair tie. And she tied her hair back up. Now, why would she do that? Why would she care what her hair looked like in that moment? See, if their hair was down and wasn't tied up, that was a sign of mourning in their lives. And to have your hair tied up meant that you were at a celebration, a day filled with joy. And she did not want anyone to think that this was a day of mourning for her, that it was anything other than joy, to stand alone in faith for Christ. The last person who ever spoke with her was her brother, who was also a Christian. She didn't have enough time to say anything to him. She just encouraged him with 3 words. Stand in faith. See, that's what it means to stand alone in the wind for God. Much like the man Haddon Robinson spoke to at the beginning, who knew what it would cost him to follow Jesus. She knew, and she was willing to pay that price. She was willing to make that sacrifice for the one who had made a sacrifice for her. That's someone who's not shallow in their nature, in their faith. That's someone who followed Jesus wherever he took them. That's someone whose faith never lessened or wavered or changed. That's someone who, even though she needed to take care of her family, she followed Jesus now. Whatever that meant. Wherever that took her. If you want more of Jesus, you have to be prepared to pay the price. You must surrender yourself, your will, your way, your pride, your accomplishments, your resources, your life, to truly find more of what Jesus has for you. I'm going to ask the worship team to come forward. As I was thinking of her story, those stories are still there. They're still a part of who we are, and still part of our culture around us. We may not be able to ask to pay that kind of price, but a few years ago when the Taliban began to take over in Afghanistan again, it was a mission that we support that has underground churches in that part of the world that really is helping Christians grow there. And if you remember, the Taliban celebrated, there's not a Christian left in Afghanistan. Well, they were all in caves, hiding, knowing that being out of there would cost them their lives. And we got a second wave of support being asked, and they were asking for water. And here's the amazing reason why. Of course, you're hiding in a cave, you need water, right? We felt like we bought a lot of water, you paid for a lot of water, but they needed more water because they couldn't go anywhere else to be baptized. And so many of them were coming to those caves to come to faith in Christ. That wanted to be baptized. They needed more water. And they were using those bottles of water to baptize each other. 5,000 of them, by the end of that year, had come to Christ. Just in September, the leader of that was found and hung in his home by the Taliban. There's still people today paying that price. Because they can't help but want more of Jesus. So as we sing this song end today, this I surrender, no. To have more of Jesus, there has to be less of you. You have to give up your pride. You have to give up yourself. You have to give up your desires. You have to give up your fear. You have to give up your own understanding of who God is and what He wants from your life. And you have to give yourself over to Him first and only. And when you surrender that, when you give that over, He will work in ways in your life that you can never imagine. So as we sing this today, may it be our prayer that here I am, I'm on my knees again, surrendering all of these things to you because I want more of you. And I know for there to be more of you, there has to be less of me. May this be the prayer of our hearts as we sing this to Him today. Let's stand and sing this together.